Thank you, everybody, for joining on. I suspect in the last 5 days that there's been a fair amount of information and a number of questions I know that have been asked about what we've done in Congress. I've been on calls earlier that Bob has hosted that sort of described the first two packages that we did. The first emergency appropriate bill, which was $8.3 billion that went to a number of issues that we were dealing with immediately. And then the second bill we did, which dealt with sick leave and paid family leave. But the big bill that we passed last Friday, which the president signed, is a $2.2 trillion package. It has many, many different elements to it. But I want to sort of focus a little bit today on relief for families, support of small businesses, our healthcare systems, dollars that will help them to respond to this crisis. We are not done with this, by the way. There will be fiscal issues we'll have to deal with. There'll be economic issues that we'll have to deal with. Our focus right now, as you can understand, and I'm sure the focus that all of you are facing is how do we deal with the immediate crisis? How do we provide supports? How do we keep people functioning? How do we keep families with food on the table and shelter? So I do want to talk just briefly about these, but then I want to get to the questions because I think that's really the important thing. The major pieces are of the legislation we passed. Obviously, the expanded unemployment insurance. I think many of you know we extended for 13 weeks the unemployment benefits. We added a $600 supplemental benefit to the state's unemployment, which the max under the state law is $500 per week. We've added $600 to that to make it $1,100 if you qualified for the maximum. If you qualified for $300 in unemployment benefits, you would now receive $900. So the $600 federal benefit is added to whatever amount you would get under the state calculation. We have obviously waived the need for someone to be actively looking for work while they're unemployed, and we sent additional dollars to the state government to try to help them deal with the what is clearly a huge a clogging of their systems due to the great significant increase in claims. The second really important part of what we did is the Paycheck Protection Program. This essentially says, and it's on a sliding scale based on revenues, but it essentially says that you can get up to a $10 million Small Business Administration guaranteed loan. And if you use the dollars, those dollars can be used for payroll, healthcare benefits, overhead, which would mean rent payments, utilities, debt service. It is 100% forgivable if you don't reduce headcount during the time of the program. The other thing, which I won't spend a lot of time with unless there's questions, just the rebate program. That's a one-time check that goes to families. There's sliding scales depending on whether you're a single head of household or joint filers. The maximum for the full benefit is $75,000 for individuals, $112,500 for head of household, and $150,000 for joint filers. That's the maximum benefit. But you can get benefits even if you exceed those amounts, and you reduce the benefit by $5 for each $100 of additional income. Those are based on the 2019 filings. If you haven't filed yet, because we have extended the time for filing, you could go off the 2018 filing. Those checks will be automatic. They'll just end up in your checking account in the next few weeks if you get refunds or pay by electronic transfer. If you pay by check or get refunds by check, you'll get a check, and this includes senior citizens, et cetera. It's $1,200 per person and $500 for children 16 and under. So those are sort of some of the main highlights. There's also a tax credit for larger businesses. When we're talking about the Paycheck Protection Act, it applies to businesses of 500 or fewer employees. So with that as just sort of a starting point, I'm happy to take questions. And I know that some were sent in advance, but Bob, maybe I'll turn this back to you to tell me how you want to deal with questions and comments.
Well, Congressman, thank you. And I thank you. I want the listeners to know that throughout this whole process, Congressman Morelle has been in contact with us, asking us what people need. So as you send things to us, as we've heard your concerns, we pass them on. And he's worked very hard on this bill. We're so glad he went down to vote last week, but it really is a godsend for us right now. We have questions coming in. Joe, I'll fire away. Maybe the first question is comes from, we hear this quite a bit, but I thank the person for sending it in. The question is, should I lay off my employees or keep and furlough them?
So what we certainly want to try to encourage is obviously as little disruption in the marketplace as possible. I remember the days when I had my small business. I owned a software development company. We had 12 employees. So if I had to lay off all of my employees and allow them to collect unemployment insurance, then 2 months later or whenever the period of time when we'll sort of be back to normal would happen, I would have to go back out and find everybody, put my teams back together. So we want to the greatest extent possible, keep these folks in place. And the way to do that, I think, is primarily through the Paycheck Protection Act. As I described it, you can essentially have virtually almost all of your bills paid for through that guaranteed load program. And as long as you don't reduce your headcount and don't let people go, that is 100% forgivable. So, I wouldn't give business advice. Obviously, everybody has to do what they have to do, but that is probably the primary way. Also, for that would apply to the smallest of businesses. It includes not-for-profits. It includes religious affiliations. So as long as you're a 501c3, you can access it. If you choose to go the route of layoffs or furloughs, those employees are obviously eligible for unemployment insurance. That relates to individuals and to families, and then there are other opportunities for businesses to get low interest loans. But I think we're trying to push people, I think, to the Paycheck Protection Program. There's $349 billion set aside to do that. The process is relatively straightforward. There are SBA lenders. We're actually including or expanding to allow banks and credit unions that are not certified to get certified. And there is a guidance that came down from the United States Treasury Department today that has information for lenders, information for small businesses, and information for individuals. So I wouldn't give business advice, but I think that's the place to start for virtually any small or medium or even some large-sized businesses that have fewer than 500 employees.
Oh, thanks, Joe. I think this is about small business. Another question came in. I'll read it to you. With a lot of information circulating, but not much clarity, I'm struggling to figure out where to start. Where do you suggest folks go? It doesn't say it, but I think it might be about a small business question.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that's exactly right. I'm just looking to make sure that this is posted already. But as I said, the Treasury Department today put out guidance, and I'm just checking literally as we do this to see if it's on my website. We're trying to get it uploaded today. But that would really, if you go to my website, which is just morelle.house.gov, you can Google me or just, it's MORELLE. And there's a whole host of information on that about it. I'm just looking to see. I know we're really trying to post all the information as we get it. And I don't see that the new guidance yet, but it will be up there. But you can also go to the Treasury Department, U.S. Treasury .gov, and I think they have the guidance information as well.
Great, thanks. I think we have a lot of small business owners and leaders on the call. Next question I have is, what support does the CARES Act provide for small business owners?
Well, that's really the way it's done. So there are a number of things that be covered. So if, let's say you have 15 employees and you provide health benefits to them, you can, by going to your lender and getting, it's a sliding scale of how much you can borrow. As I said, the max amount is 10 million, but there's a sliding scale. And actually, as I'm looking at it, the U.S. Treasury Department, just Google Treasury Department, and right on their home screen, for small businesses seeking direct relief from COVID-19, click here to learn more about the Paycheck Protection Act. It's really, really good. It's got a top line overview of the program. It's got a section if you're a borrower, section if you're a lender. The application for borrowers can be found. It's really, really good, but it does allow you to pay the payroll, healthcare benefits. So if you provide healthcare for your employees, you can pay their premiums through this. You can pay mortgage or rent payments, debt service on equipment, utilities. And then at the end of this, as I say, it's forgivable if you started with 15 employees and you come out of the crisis still having all those people on your payroll.
Great. Joe, you touched on this, but I don't want to slight this person who sent this in. Next question is, any specific guidance on the Paycheck Protection Program?
Well, again, I would go and see if almost everybody on the call, small businesses, not-for-profits, have existing relationships with their banks. And I suspect most banks in the area have already the ability to do SBA loans. So they will automatically be certified for this program. There's nothing they have to do. I've talked to some bankers in the area just to try to glean from them any challenges that they're having. Obviously, the big issue here is going to be how quickly can we get dollars in the hands of folks. So you'll be able to start applying tomorrow, which is, I'm sorry, I misstated that. You'll be able to start applying on April 3rd, which is, today is Wednesday, I think, right, Bob? I'm losing track of days.
Friday's the 3rd.
Yeah, so Friday you can apply and receive loans, covers payrolls, expenses. It's got on the form, it does talk about it, most mortgage interest, rent, utility costs over the 8-week period after the loan is made. Payroll costs are capped at $100,000 on an annualized basis for each employee. So if you have an employee who makes $120,000, the $20,000 above the 100 would not be able to be paid using this process. So you'll have to work with your employees to see if they're, if you have the ability to pay them the additional amount, or whether or not they're willing to forbear some of their salary during this. We're looking at this. It does have more information on it. I would also expect, although this is certainly not a guarantee, but we have already begun to have large-scale conferences with my colleagues in Washington about the next set of packages. I think there's certainly the possibility this package gets extended or additional help will be available. We do expect a lot of small businesses to be getting in the queue for this. So there is more information on the guidance that's given by the Treasury Department today. For instance, one of the things that we had not said in the law, but this guidance says, because of the high subscription and the expectation that many people are going to be using it, that not more than 25% of the forgiven money may be for non-payroll costs. So they're clearly trying to drive this to paying payroll. But again, most people, their payroll will be the significant cost that they have each week.
Great. We're getting a lot of small business questions in here. Another one just came in. What SBA loans are available to a small business or to small businesses who avoid layoffs or furlough of their staff?
Well, the Paycheck Protection Program is the program to do that. So there are other, guaranteed loan programs, other credits that can be had, but you can't mix them for the most part. So this really is, I think, the vehicle that most people will use because it really is focused on keeping people at work, even if you're working from home, or frankly, if you can't work because you're not an essential employee and there's no way to do your job online. We've decided, as a matter of public policy, the United States government wants to keep teams and small businesses and not-for-profits in place, help them get through this 8-week period, which is when we hope people will be, relatively back to normal. Obviously, that's just an estimate on our part. There's no science. We'll be following the science. I suspect, though, we will be back either to extend the provisions of this or to come up with additional programs. The other thing I'd say, and I really appreciate this dialogue to be able to do it, if folks want to give additional comments either to us through our email and you can go to my site, or to Bob and just, wherever you see gaps in what we're doing or concerns being raised or things that this, no matter how hard we try, it's 330 million people we're trying to put into programs almost without any notice. We will clearly have gaps. There will be things that we haven't thought of. We're dealing with that in the mortgage industry right now. So we need to hear that feedback as well.
Great. As the congressman is talking, I just want to let everybody know that what Joe is talking about, the information is on our website, on his, and I think what we'll do at the end of the call or later today, we'll try and email you as much information as we can for all the people that are on today, just so we make sure everybody gets the same information. Joe, next question coming in, and it gives you a sense of a lot of our folks here are all small business owners again. Are there any indications when the SBA loans application for the CARES Act will be made available, and when will those funds actually be dispersed?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're obviously rushing to try to get this done. So as I said, the applications can begin being submitted on Friday. We're trying to get lenders up and running and getting the money to them to extend the credit. I would talk to your bank, but I think our hope is within the next couple of weeks at the latest. And we feel that way about not only the Paycheck Protection Program. We also feel that way about the rebate program, which will give at least families that are struggling an injection of cash quickly. And the same is true of the unemployment insurance. We've waived the 1 week wait period. We've waived the requirement that it should be working. And for now, I mean, one of the great things about this is all of these programs now include gig workers, independent contractors, people who in the past may not have qualified for some programs, but we're really trying to be thoughtful about casting the net as wide as we can.
Great. Again, following in line with small businesses, next one coming in here. Is there aid in this bill for small businesses with no employees? We are owner run and have already lost $45,000 in revenue. We heard that quite a bit.
Yeah, the Paycheck Protection Act, I think, extends to individuals as well, people who are sole proprietors. So I think to pay all your other bills and to pay yourself, I think because obviously you're the payroll, but I'm virtually certain that includes sole proprietors, self-employed individuals. So everybody can apply. So if your business is just a one-person shop, I have a brother-in-law who does tile. He's an independent contractor himself, and he will be able to apply for this because clearly the work that he has been able to do over the years is not happening right now. He works in residential and commercial settings. Most of them are shut down. He was home the other day. He could apply for unemployment. So I think you need to figure out if you're a sole proprietor, which one is better for you. And that, I certainly wouldn't give advice on, but the unemployment insurance is now extended to independent contractors, as is the Paycheck Protection Program. So those are available without regard to whether you have employees or not. Obviously, if you have employees, you can't lay any of them off to get the forgiveness, but everyone, even sole proprietors and self-employed individuals, are eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program.
Great. We have a number of not-for-profit questions coming in. I'll try and maybe just put this all. This is like probably 4 or 5 in one, but what types of not-for-profits or nonprofits are eligible for these loans?
Yeah, I mean, just about anybody. It's a 501c3. I think we were careful to do that. I think most not-for-profits in Rochester certainly have fewer than 500 employees. You do have to be impacted by this. So if you're, I was talking to a friend of mine who called me the other day whose business is essentially an essential business, and his revenue base, because of the uniqueness of his work, hasn't slowed down at all. So we were walking through all the pieces of the program, and I got to, at the end, I said, well, you have to have a deficit because of the virus. He goes, oh, my revenues are actually up a little bit. I said, well, then you don't qualify. I mean, this is really for people who are facing a crisis whose revenues have declined. So there is a test for it, but it's a pretty modest test.
Great. Have a larger business question coming in, Joe, on this one. Is there any support available for businesses with more than 500 employees?
Yeah, this it's a little more challenging, but there is tax credits available for larger employers. Most of the focus was on the small employers, the small businesses. So but there are things that are available, and we can get information to people about it. But there's essentially a tax credit program where you get essentially a credit, refundable credit for a percentage of the payroll that you have, and we can get people more information on that as well. That'll be available on my website also.
Great. Got a number of unemployment questions. I'll try and call these down a little bit. How many additional weeks of unemployment benefits would this is would our employees be eligible for?
So New York law right now is 26 weeks. The federal benefits for New Yorkers, for everybody's extended for 13 weeks. So whatever the state length of time would be, you add 13 weeks. New York happens to be 26, so it'll extend out to 39 weeks.
Great.
And I did want to, Bob, because I wanted to give the name of it, not this question, the previous question. It's the Employee Retention Credit for employers subject to closure, and that's a refundable payroll tax credit for 50% of wages paid by eligible employers to certain employees during the crisis. It's available to employers, not-for-profits, or operations that have been fully or partially suspended as a result of the government order limiting commerce, travel, or group meetings. And it allows, it also provides to employers who experience a greater than 50% reduction in quarterly receipts, and they measure that on a year-to-year basis. So that's for larger employers.
Great. Thanks. A lot of information coming in. Next question. Where can I find the application form for the pandemic unemployment insurance?
So there you go to the Department of Labor, the New York State Department of Labor. I will tell you that the number of cases has gone up exponentially. I was trying to think if there's a word bigger than exponentially, but I don't think there is. So the website has been bolstered. There were a lot of complaints. There may still be some real issues. Completing the application, which you can begin online, has to be done over the phone. I believe that was the information as of yesterday. The governor cited this as something he was troubled by, that people were calling many, many, many times. But it's eligible. This is all this is. I believe even the unemployment benefits are retroactive back before the crisis started. But if you have persistent problems getting through that, let us know. But I think it was back to February 15th. I'm looking through my information. It does go. The unemployment compensation will go until July 31st of 2020. So that $600 additional pandemic unemployment compensation will go until then.
Great. Again, a few questions kind of called into one here, but number of questions asking for, is there any assistance or group that can help navigate filling out all these applications?
Well, that's a good question. There's obviously the SBA, and we may do something, Bob. If we have, I know we talked about trying to do this on maybe a weekly basis, and now that the guidance is coming down from the Treasury Department, because we did give them a few days to come up with the regulations and the process, maybe if we did a call in perhaps a week from now, we could walk through all of that, and we could get maybe someone from the Small Business Administration to join us on the call if people think that would be helpful.
I think it'd be very helpful, Congressman, and I want to thank you because the interest is so high. I think we have between 400 and 500 people on this call today. We're going to schedule a weekly call based on your schedule, if that's okay, and just have these questions pop up. We have a couple more coming in, but I think just really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions. Many are just really specific, and for being able to do this off the cuff, you're doing a great job because it's. I have two more that are coming in right now. I'll hit those. Actually, the one out next is I think it came up before already, but what types of not-for-profits are eligible for SBA assistance?
Yeah, it's really any that are 501c3s that have fewer than 500 employees. So this is really intended to try to get it It's a 501c3, which is a not-for-profits, 501c19, which is a veterans organization. So any of those folks would be eligible for the loan that's forgiven under the Paycheck Protection Program, and that is all determined as a percentage of their revenues. So that's how you figure out what the size of the loan is that you're able to get to, and that's true of everyone, either based on payroll and or on revenues.
Great. Most of the questions that are coming in now, I think you've kind of answered already. I'm looking at these, but maybe Joe, ask a global question. How would you gauge the overall community response? Because you have strong roots here, been a leader here for decades, but you also have a national overview right now with your colleagues. So would love to have you give your sense of how you think the response is going here from our governor right down to our community, our region right here, which things that you have seen and maybe your reaction.
Well, first of all, as it relates to the governor, I know, I always say this, and I know this is true of you too, Bob, that we're kind of biased because we have long-time relationships with him. I think he's doing an amazing job. I think, certain times require certain leaders and certain types of leaders. And I always, I've often introduced the governor at events by calling him a force of nature, which he always then whispers to me afterward, is that really a compliment? But I mean it as a compliment. I think he's doing an amazing job. He is focused in like no one I know, particularly when people are in harm's way. He has sort of an extra level of energy that kicks in and focus that's really remarkable. On the local level, I think Adam Bello has just done an amazing job. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, this is, he's now just 3 months into the job, and most of his time when he's sort of learning, first the levers of that government has really been thrown into this. So we're doing, as you know, calls daily with our hospitals and our healthcare systems. They've been terrific. We're also doing daily calls with our community-based organizations. We keep spreading the word. One of the things, and I don't mean to be a dark cloud here, but I think one of the challenges for all of us is going to be more, as much as it's a physical challenge, and as much as we have to deal with food and shelter and keeping businesses, alive for the next few months and make sure they can come out of this okay. This is going to be as much an emotional and mental challenge as it is anything else. For many people on the call, look, there's a lot of high-powered people in this community, entrepreneurs and innovators. And this isn't normal for us to be sort of at home and not be social. So this is going to take a toll on us. And the big challenge for us is going to be to get through the emotions and the mental challenges, stay focused. Because, if you look at this, the apex or the peak in Rochester might not happen until the middle to end of May. I mean, we may be at this for a long time, folks. And I certainly hope it goes sooner than that. I think we're working really hard. I think Rochester, as a community, has responded so well to try to flatten the curve. But even with that, this is going to it just puts a lot of pressure on us. I think every day that passes, it's less likely that children will be returning to school during the academic year. So this is going to take the most of all of us. And the one thing I do believe is that this community is as resilient as any around the country. When I talk to my colleagues every day, I'm frankly really, really proud of our region, because I think we're doing as good a job of staying connected, staying coordinated, talking to one another as any community in the country. And I will say, I think I'm involved in more discussions like this with you, Bob, and with our not-for-profits, our hospitals, our government partners, than I think many of my colleagues are in their districts. So I take that as a source of pride, not because of me, but just because we have such a, just a real mentality in Rochester and Monroe County of coming together. I think it's part of our, our DNA, so to speak. It's what we're all about, and this is another example of that. So I think we're doing really well, but this is tough. It's going to be tough to get through, but we can only do it if we're together, even as we're apart.
Joel, I had, your decades of public service, you have created relationships here. You've invested in those, and they come back in really just huge numbers now, because for all the times I know we're on the phone and connecting with people, you're connecting with those same folks. So you're connecting, you're asking, you're listening, you're on the ground, and that makes all the difference in the world. You're not some guy in an office somewhere. You're out there, you're with people, you're listening, not with people physically now, of course, but you're connecting with them constantly, which I think is kudos to you. Question, I don't want us to snub our callers, but our question came in, so bear with me. I think we have a few people on the line who represent our great arts and culture community. So maybe just one global question with the bill. Is there anything available for our arts and culture community here?
Well, there is actually, and I'm going to struggle to find it in my book of things, but there is dollars available for cultural institutions. We put some additional dollars for public broadcasting, and I would just, because I'm probably not going to find it quickly here, but there is additional dollars for arts and cultural institutions. I would say, though, that most of our cultural institutions in Rochester could certainly avail themselves of the Paycheck Protection Program. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but even if you're not for profits, I was talking to a friend who's with the RPO. Obviously, their sales and their concert tickets, not to choose one over another, but said, I told them, you should look at this because I'm certain that you're qualified for it. And so I would say that to my friends at the Art Gallery and at the Strong Museum, the Rochester Museum and Science Center, they can all take advantage of that program because they're a not-for-profit that qualifies under the definitions of the program.
That's great. A couple of things here. I'm going to give you last words, Congressman, but our governor's been out front from day one. He's done a tremendous job leading the state. Our county executive, you see Adam Bello and Dr. Mendoza constantly out front. Information matters, leadership matters. And I'm going to say the same to you because I'm not aware of any congressman that I have heard around the state, around this country, that has been as accessible and public as you have been, because you have been in the media, you have been on these calls with our members and our businesses and our leaders here, and not-for-profit leaders. You're on a call, I think, almost every day with hospitals and not-for-profit leaders. But kudos to you for having boots on the ground throughout this process and for taking time out of your crazy schedule, away from your work, away from your family, to spend time with us. So I appreciate it so much. And given the interest, Joe, we have like today almost 400 people on this call. Every time we schedule one of these, we fill it right up, and everybody realizes what happened last week. You had to vote on this bill. You went down. Your support was incredibly important. So we would love to schedule a call every week. We handled a lot of questions that came in today. Appreciate people being on the line because we'll get more questions next week. And probably each week, as you know, things change, things evolve, new issues come up. But I want to personally, on behalf of all of us, our membership, Rob Sams, our board chair who was on the call, our board members, our members, thanking you for your time, your leadership, your support. You've been tremendous to us, so I greatly appreciate that. And I'm going to give our great congressman the last word before we close off today.
Well, again, I really can't thank the Chamber enough for connecting us, and Bob for your leadership. I do really appreciate, we're working, my staff and I, from remote locations, most of us working home. But go to our website if there are questions you have. The bill is about 800 pages long, and much of it requires further regulations from the various departments, whether it's the Treasury Department, IRS. There will be, when you're building big things like this, as you know, it's almost as though you're moving tectonic plates, and whenever you're moving giant things, there are going to be some disparities, some inequities, some things that just don't fit exactly to meet your needs. That's when we really want you to email us. Go on the website. You can just drop an email to me at jdm@mail.house.gov, or just go on our website and do it. We've got our team trying to get in touch with our folks in Washington to get specific answers, or when there aren't specific answers, to try to get them to give us more guidance. I got off the phone with Superintendent Dade. I'm talking to the mayor and the deputy mayor daily, our not-for-profits, our hospitals, our education systems. So we're trying to keep everything alive. And as I said, I may have said this before, but it does feel a little bit like building an airplane while you're flying it. So, and I don't think that anyone knows for certain that all the things we're doing are right or doing them in the right method. But I can tell you this, we're dedicated and committed to this, all of us in Washington, locally, at the state level. And we're working together. I talk to the governor several times a week. We're trying to address challenges that he has and the state has. Obviously, as a former state legislator, I care deeply about making sure that they're solvent and they're able to do the things they need to do. So just keep the communication lines open. I'm happy to do this as frequently as people think it's important to do or necessary to do, and then we can continue to be a resource for all of you. Again, Bob, thanks so much for everything you're doing, and thanks for putting this together today.
Joe, I thank you. I thank my team, Mark Cohen, who worked on our end, your Kelly Benedict and Sean Hart and your team who put this together. And I thank you and all you've done. And on behalf of all of us, we want to thank our first responders, our frontline medical folks every day, our doctors, nurses, first responders on the line throughout this crisis who put their lives at risk. They are the heroes, and we're so proud to be part of this process to help get information out to people. So to our great Congressman Joe, thank you. Everybody listening, thank you all. And we'll have a call next week with the Congressman at 1 p.m. next Wednesday, hopefully every week.